spent some time there and had a meeting of minds. And as you know, we joined the group here in Chicago, joined Juventutem last spring. And so Father's going to just explain a little bit about what he does in the movement and what it's about. So please join me in welcoming Father. Some of you from a distance. I just arrived from Nebraska, where I was attending yesterday morning the diaconal ordination of some members of my community, the Juventutem St. Peter, and my first real visit in Chicago. I live in England, near London. Some of you have traveled there, and I've been living abroad for 20 years now, because I'm French originally, as you can hear it. 10 years ago, I was working at the headquarters of our fraternity in Switzerland, in a place called Fribourg, a very Catholic place. And I got a phone call from some laymen, 2 young laymen from France, asking me if our fraternity was doing anything for World Youth Day, which was to take place 1.5 years later in Germany, and for the first time with Pope Benedict leading it. And we had no particular plans to attend World Youth Day. I had attended myself as a seminarian before that in Paris, and I know that some members of traditional communities would also attend it sometimes, but there was never a sort of corporate, if I may say, delegation with the traditional liturgy as its very charisma, to quote Father. So we looked around a bit and we thought, well, that might be worth trying. Perhaps some of you have been to World Youth Day before, and perhaps some of you have not been before Pope Benedict. I can say that it's not always very good. At World Youth Day, there are things happening which really are not exemplary, are not really something which helps us in our faith. Sometimes things are taught which are not really the best thing, and some behaviors and all that. So it was a bit challenging, because we knew in the traditional movement that many people would be very reluctant and would say, well, why do we want to go there? A bit like what Father just explained. The reason why there are traditional communities like Father's community, Christ the King Institute, or my fraternity, St. Peter, or any others, or the Clear Creek Monastery in Oklahoma, this is because we have suffered from seeing the deficiencies of the new ways of doing things. We know that it's not what the Council Vatican II wanted, but still there has been an implementation which was always more modern and adventurous, and really was getting rid of all the riches of our Catholic patrimony. So it's true that people who have made that choice for the traditional ways, I don't really see why we would want to be at World Youth Day, which is like a big gathering of young people, which is good, but sometimes with not a lot of training and habits applied. Anyway, to make it short, we managed to receive guarantees from the Holy See that we could be there as one of the many delegations, but with the traditional Mass and liturgy as the very specificity of that delegation. And perhaps now in 2014, it sounds like something taken for granted, because thank God in so many places you are able to attend these masses or this liturgy, or to meet with priests or friars or sisters who celebrate or sanctify according to. But remember that in 2004, it was something which had not been done, and to try and have it officially acknowledged at World Youth Day was quite a challenge. So we had actually Cardinal George, speaking of him in Chicago, was kind enough to be one of the cardinals who officially registered with Juventutem, not the full time of World Youth Day, but some activities. He led us in the Rosary. That was one of the public events we had. Cardinal George Pell of Sydney was the first prelate in the history of World Youth Day who led an all-right prayer. It was the Vespers, the typical Vespers in that beautiful church where we were in Germany. And so that's the way it happened. And we found that there were 1,000 young people who were registered at World Youth Day with Juventutem. And that's, we calculated that it is 1 out of 1,000, because at the papal mass on the Sunday you had 1 million, say, if my calculation is correct. That is for every 1,000 of young Catholics who were at this event, 1 of them was registered under the Juventutem banner. The name Juventutem was chosen actually in America. I was in our seminary in Nebraska 10 years ago, and we were discussing with these 2 laymen by email the possibility of basically finding a name, because there was the Chartres pilgrimage in France. You may have heard of it, walking from Notre Dame in Paris to Notre Dame in Chartres, a very beautiful Marian shrine, and that's every year at Pentecost. And if you haven't been, you're very naughty, and you must get there someday. Anyway, we wanted to advertise this new movement or gathering which we were planning for World Youth Day, and it didn't have a name. And obviously, when you want to tell somebody about what you're going to do, and you need a name, because otherwise the other person doesn't know, okay, how do I refer to it? So we've been thinking a bit of various things. And then Juventutem was chosen specifically as a quote from Psalm 42 in the prayers at the foot of the altar in the traditional liturgy. If you remember, if you're familiar with it, there is a psalm being prayed by the priests and alternating with the altar servers. And the idea was that although it is addressed to the young people, we are not so much concerned with age as with the youth of the heart, of the soul, which is depends on the proximity with God's grace. So in that Psalm 42, when the priest says, "We go to the altar of God, to God to give youth to my joy to my youth," it's not so much that the priest should be 20 years of age, to be a very youngish person. It's not that sort of youth which the Church has in mind. It is very much the one given by proximity to God and to His grace. So this is what we want for the young people. We want all of you to be offered the full range of the means of sanctification which the of the Church has designed across the centuries. And when Father Philip was quoting young people who speak to him and say, why was that hidden from us? Why we've been cheated in a way? It's wonderful to see now that more and more young people are able to discover these traditions. Juventutem has as its aim the sanctification of the young people through the Roman traditions of the Church. That is chiefly the liturgy, and in the liturgy specifically Holy Mass, but not only. There is any kind of devotion, rosary, any litanies, the Station of the Cross, and very much at the heart of it, the doctrine. Because to be attracted by traditional Mass or liturgy for the reason that it's beautiful, smells good of incense, or the nice colors of the vestments and all that. This is very good, but obviously all of us here understand that it's not enough. That this beauty only is legitimate and has a meaning in as much as it expresses God's truth, the revelation. in the magisterium and in all the catechism and all that you can read. And I think that's something which the previous generation that, who were young adults in the 60s, have been deprived of, and since then as well. So many people nowadays don't know their Catholic faith, they don't know the very basics, and the traditional liturgy is able to express all this doctrine and this belief in the real presence, in the sacrificial nature of the Mass, in the priestly character which is imprinted in the soul of the priest, the fact that he is able to consecrate the host and the chalice in a way which the laity cannot do, but they unite with it. All these things are so important and are beautifully displayed and expressed in the traditional liturgy. So we went to World Youth Day, it worked well, and just like World Youth Day in general, in the initiative of John Paul II, was not to be every 3 years. People travel the world and have a nice picnic together and then get home. The idea was to give a real boost, really, on sanctification for the young people, to show them that they are not alone in wanting to learn more about our Lord, about the Church, about the sacraments. And it's true, despite the excesses at World Youth Day often, there is at least one thing which is very essential. It's just number. When you see 1, 2, 3, 4 millions of young people who are gathered together, and with the miracle that there is not one serious incident happening, whereas if you take just 10,000 football supporters, especially in England perhaps, and they are gathered for, allegedly for sport, that you will see, well, bad things happening. Even to mention only on the cars or displays of shock which may be damaged, not to mention individuals. So that's always a great thing to see that it's not 10,000, it's 1 million, 2 million or more. These young people gather together, and the whole city every time, because I've been in Paris, I've been in Germany, well, used to have been in Australia and Sydney, and was in Spain again with some of you. It's always the same thing. You see the whole big, large city, like Chicago or bigger, and which is like taken over by young people everywhere in the street. And as it happens, these young people are Catholics, or even if some of them are not, they are there for the same purpose, to get to know more about the Catholic faith and pray together. But indeed, I insisted on the fact that it has to be, it has to lead to daily sanctification. And that's where you come from, or rather when I refer to you with all of these groups. We tried to develop in the last 10 years some little groups everywhere in the world, and actually there are some, or were some, because sometimes they don't last many years, but on every continent. But the focus is simply to use, very simply, this Roman tradition of the Church to get to know our Lord and His Church, and to love our Lord and His Church, and Our Lady and the Saints. In other words, to become holy. That's all it's about. You see, perhaps you have experienced that in the difficulties you may find to get permission for a traditional Mass somewhere in your parish. And so, because sometimes the conflictual side of things is very much in front of us, and there is a little risk there that we may lose sight of the fact that it's all about becoming holy and loving our Lord and His Church. So the traditional liturgy, and we have a Juventutem flag here, should not be something of a party, of a lobby. It's very much sanctification, and that's why we chose as our logo, as you can see there, stylized monstrance with in the middle. Perhaps you don't see anything there, but actually there's a host in the middle of the monstrance, as should be, and so this is to tell us that the very focus of what we're trying to do is our Lord and our sanctification. So there is a website, the general website of Juventutem, which is very much needs to be updated. But anyway, on it you will find a description of the history and the little commitments which we encourage young people to take, at least to pray for the sanctification of the youth, that is praying for each other, which is very important. Not only young people you know, but even young people you don't know, or people you've heard of who are perhaps not leading lives according to our Lord's will. And so to pray for each other, possibly praying Psalm Juventutem, Psalm 42, which is a bit like the, well, not the motto, but the theme of Juventutem. So why not pray that every morning? Even if you can't go to the traditional Mass every day, you can have your missal with you, or you can print it from the internet and have Psalm Juventutem in your wallet somewhere, and just pray it in the bus, asking God to improve and renew in your soul this spiritual youth, and for you and for the whole world. Also once a week to enter a church or an oratory to worship our Lord, really, truly and substantially present in the most precious sacrament of the altar, in the Eucharist. And that is second, really, commitment. And once a year to attend an event which is officially Juventutem. So again, well, like today could be counted as one of them. I know that in the Juventutem groups worldwide, there is often, we ask for a minimum of 3 founding members who will download and print from the internet the application form, send it to our secretariat, and will be given, once we have checked that you are Catholic in good standing with the right intentions, that you are not neo-Muslims or whatever, then we will issue the certificate of affiliation to the International Juventutem Federation. I think I've spoken quite a lot now. I don't know if there are questions or anything you would like to ask.
At the time that you founded Juventutem, I believe it was in the 90s?
It was really in, the name was chosen on the 24th of May 2004. That's why we chose that feast day, which is Our Lady Help of Christians. That's the yearly anniversary of Juventutem. So 24th of May this year, just be sure to have a special something prayer, Our Lady Help of Christians. Yes, 10 years ago.
Okay. At that time, the traditional Mass faced, it was in a tougher climate than it is now, post-Mormon Pontificum. Were there any methods that you used to surmount the challenges that you faced in spreading Juventutem and growing it at that time that would be, useful for us? How did you surmount challenges that I'm sure were graver than the challenges that we face now?
I think, obviously there was a lot of suspicion, as Father was saying about his own experience trying to, that there are many people who simply, in good faith, they, at the time and even perhaps even now, can't really put 2 and 2 together, that you can know the traditional Mass and be 100% loyal to the Holy Father and Pope Francis now, at the time of Benedict or John Paul. These 2 things, some people find it difficult to believe that it does work together. So one has to be very patient and very gentle to help our contradictor or opponent to realize that we're not just Catholics. So gentleness and patience and courtesy are very important. Not to be sort of triumphalistic and I know, again, don't get me wrong, I know that sometimes you get fed up because you're trying to do things which are very legitimate, which have all the stamps from the Holy See, and there are hindrances put in your way which are completely illegitimate. And so this generates frustration and anger. And rather than being gentle and patient with the person, you want to do something else. So I know it's not easy, but I think that's very much what our Lord, Divine Providence, expects of your generation nowadays as young people interested in the traditional liturgy and spirituality. It is to cultivate in particular these virtues of gentleness and patience and forbearing, to demonstrate that all these traditions are not a little, toy in the museum which a little elite, would like to play with. No, it's a living instrument, for the sanctification of the church, and that you show it by trying to become, more holy yourself, and that is implemented in your dealing with the local authorities when they don't answer your letter, for the mass or whatever, or are being a bit indelicate, and you just continue with obedience, but also with perseverance and determination. We are determined very much, because it's not us. It's basically the tradition of the church. It's not something we have invented. It's not a charism, which we found somewhere on the internet, or the internet is helpful to make it known, but it existed before that, and that is what makes our strength, and why also more and more people are attracted to it, including young people and young married couples, young families, children, and Father, I'm sure will confirm that in the average congregation, when you have the traditional mass, the percentage of young families, young children, and young adults is very often higher than in, so to speak, normal parishes. I don't want to make an unfair comparison, but it's true. Yeah. So to be patient, to be gentle, to be careful what you write on the internet in particular. And on Facebook and all that. Remember that Facebook can be read by more people than your immediate friends. And these people include parishes, bishops, and cardinals. So, yes, it's important not to... I know it's not your intention, but it's important to phrase things and even picture and all that, to post it in a way which cannot be construed or misinterpreted as, oh, these are a little, excited elitist group, and who do they think they are? And it has to be, you have to be prudent there. And then to know exactly, well, I'm not sure it's the right word, to know your rights. I speak with many priests in England and in other places, in dioceses, and very often they feel under pressure that they know there is Summorum Pontificum, they know there is Universe Ecclesiae, they know there is simply the rubrics of the new missal, but they also see that if they start implementing this strictly according to the law, to what is written, which would be very good if they did, people around, fellow clergy and perhaps the bishops, will be in a position with them and say, this is not the way we do it here. You must basically compromise, you must do this thing. So it's important for you as well as young adults to know this text, Summorum Pontificum Universe Ecclesiae, published by Pope Benedict, and to really know where you stand, and to understand that what you are requesting, it is not out of charity that you should get it, but out of justice. We are not begging for charity, which is a wonderful thing to do, but in this case, it's not the point. This is justice. This is the right of any Catholic in a person, priest or laity. So again, with gentleness and patience, but not as if the bishop or the priest could tell you yes or no. The question is not yes or no. The question is when. At what time can we have that Mass, Father? It's not yes or no. That's very, very important. I mean, obviously, some priests are busy, don't know how to say it, so one has to have common sense and not demand it in every parish. But normally, in every sort of major town, it should be possible. Have I covered this?
No. Thank you. I have another question unless somebody else has.
There are any other questions?
Oh, yeah. Father, actually, two related questions. So first of all, what occasions you were risk to a America? And
Sorry?
What occasions your visit to America? And secondly, what sort of a presence does Juventutem, in particular, the traditional right in general, and what's essentially post-Christian Britain? What's it like over there?
Or in Britain?
Yes.
You have a refill if you need. I know it's a bit warm here, so so did you say what's the occasion of my coming here in America? Yeah. This is to attend the ordination yesterday of that young English deacon from our fraternity in Nebraska, and also to meet you. That's the point. Because it's internet and all that. It's helpful, but it's not the same as being in the same room, even for a couple of hours. Yes, and perhaps we have Paul here, who in the last forum has accepted to be the secretary of the Juventutem International Federation. So that means the whole world. So
half of us are here.
So, by the way, I'm the chaplain of that federation. So Paul can tell us more perhaps about the US. But I was very glad to see that there are about 15 groups in North America which have been founded in the last 2 years. So that's very good. About Britain, well, it's very small, England, is here. And Catholicism has been very much persecuted and had recovered really in the mid 19th century. But since the late 1960s, I'm afraid it's not doing very well. So the seminaries are closing down one after the other. The religious novitiates and convents are closing down. The parishes are being amalgamated. So it's not doing very well. What I can say and see from my little experience, having been in this country, that country in England for about 8 years altogether, I think it's not very different from here. It's people, families, or young couples, or young adults who are led by grace to want to know more about their Catholic identity. They see that what they had been offered in perhaps where they were in their parishes, not to generalize, but let's say in this particular places where they were, was not really up to it and was not sufficient to sustain their faith and to protect them against an increasing aggressive mentality and anti-Christian really, and anti-Catholic in particular. And so when they hear about traditional communities and they make it their home for their own sanctification, for their children. It's still extremely small in Great Britain. The number of stable, all-right parishes is very tiny. It's perhaps three maximum, 4 places where you have daily mass in the all-right with few activities around. So it's not very big. But I really think that because these traditions are not our creation, they will continue, they will be enriched for sure, and even the Mass you may have seen this morning, 1962 Missal, beautiful, even that is not the definitive stage of the liturgy, and it may and will certainly, unless the end of the world occurs tonight, but it will certainly be enriched and improved. So that's another thing. Perhaps in Juventutem we want to be very careful and not to present as an end in itself, even the traditional missal, because it's a means to an end, our sanctification.
Thank you. Could you speak about the Juventutem chapters that still exist in Europe? How, if at all, they cooperate together, whether it's a short pilgrimage, and talk about the Christ the King pilgrimage to Rome.
Well, there's a problem with the young people, and the problem is almost incurable, and that is that they get older. And because Juventutem groups are made of young people, they also reach a stage after a few years when those who were committed at the beginning are happily married, or happily in a monastery, or happily in a carmel. If you're interested, I was 2 days ago in a beautiful traditional carmel in Nebraska, and I spoke with Mother Superior, and I begged her to start a foundation in England for our young girls there. But if you have a vocation to contemplative life, in this country you are blessed with at least 3 of these carmels striving with vocations. But I'm sure you know that already. If you're not sure, come and ask me. I will direct you to Mother Superior. Anyway, they don't stay young. In their hearts they do, but they just move on with their life, which is normal. And so that's a problem, so to speak, which is structural, which we have encountered. We used to have really groups everywhere in the world. When I say groups, I mean, don't imagine, not at all even like the sort of number we are here. It's often 3, 4, 5, 6, and perhaps on some more important events, they bring their friends along, and so it's a bit bigger. So it's a very modest thing, honestly. It's not a big undertaking. But it was good to see that we had groups in Nigeria, in Hong Kong, in New Zealand, in Europe, of course, quite a lot, and in this country as well. What was really displayed there was the fact that the traditional liturgy and this tradition in general are not something linked with a particular cultural background or space of history. It's not only for, I don't know, Italians, or only for French, or only for the Irish, or the Chinese, or it's really something universal because it's Catholic, and it used to be the way of praying everywhere in the world up to 1970, as you know. So this universality of Juventutem, of these small groups everywhere in the world, including in Kenya, we had one. This is very, very important. Now, it's true because it's young people and they are busy with their lives and studies and getting married and other things. We didn't really have like a permanent headquarters with staff being paid to run the show, really. So it's very much left to initiatives and goodwill, and as a consequence, it's true that the bonds between the various groups and chapters have loosened sometimes. The main opportunities to strengthen this were, it's true, World Youth Day, when we first had this get-together in Germany, then in Sydney, and then in Spain, and I didn't go to Rio, but there will be the next one in Krakow. So there is World Youth Day, and there are some more events linked with the continent, like in Europe we have this Chartres pilgrimage in France, which is, not to be chauvinistic, but it is the largest traditional event in the world, when you have 10,000 young adults walking 70 miles in 2.5 days, and you don't carry all your night gear, you leave it in the truck, and you get it in the evening. But it is quite physical. Anyway, it's a great thing to be part of, and indeed many young people who are involved in Juventutem do go to this Chartres pilgrimage. Now with Paul as our secretary, and also a new president for the federation, who's an Englishman in Reading, where I live, George Stephen. We hope that it will facilitate the coordinating of all the groups together. And Paul was asking then about in October in Rome, there is, it will be the 3rd year, I think, that there is a pilgrimage called Summorum Pontificum, which is for whoever is interested in the traditional liturgy. It's not a workshop, it's not really about conferences, it's more about being there at the pilgrim, praying there, and attending beautiful pontifical high masses, with cardinals and vespers in Rome. And so we have been, Juventutem have been requested to lead an official Juventutem delegation, because the organizers of this pilgrimage are very eager to manifest to the world, because many media and clergy will see the event, that it's not only about people who would have known those traditions when they were younger, but it's also all of you, young people nowadays, who are attracted to it and want to be sanctified by it. So to have Juventutem officially involved in that event will be also a service to the wider church, because it will show that these traditions are alive in a way. People who want to know it already, but it's good to update this and to make it sure that everybody gets the message. So if some of you have the budget or are willing to spare and fly to Rome for 1 week, we will have a Juventutem program. We are blessed with my fraternity to have our own parish church in Rome, in the center of Rome, beautiful church called the Most Holy Trinity of the Pilgrims. And so it will be a very, at least we know we have this secure base for all of the liturgies of Juventutem, and of course take part in all the other general events.
Would you be able to just give a highlight or two of maybe 1 or 2 examples of how you've witnessed Juventutem helping those young adults who belong to it along their process of sanctification, perhaps somewhat, maybe 1 or 2 young adults who met their spouses through Juventutem, or found a vocation to religious life, or who simply just found a great deal of joy in living a single vocation.
Yes. Well, I know of several who are now seminarians. I know of one, she co-founded a group in Edinburgh in Scotland, and she's now a professed Benedictine nun in England, Helen. So some others have got married, but actually one of the 3 co-founders of Juventutem, one of these laymen, Rami, is now happily married with several children in France and in Versailles. And so, yes, it leads to very, very, very good thing. Perhaps it's nothing original, to be honest. Again, I insist on that. We're not claiming that we find the way. We simply are alive today in 2014. We look around and we see what the church authorizes and supports and offers, and we see that among all that panel there are tools and instruments which are simply inherited from the past, which have been designed and enriched with the wisdom of ages, and we want to select those because we know their work, and others don't work so well. So for you young adults, I imagine the great immediate benefit is just to see that while using these traditions, you are not distancing yourself from the church, because in a Juventutem group, for instance, or even an event, you know that you are participating in something which has the stamp from the local parish, and the local parish priest has permission from his local bishop, and that is something we insist on very much. And when I said when we get an application that we check, it's indeed to be sure that this is developed and started in good standing with the church, not in a spirit of opposition or distrust. So for you to be able to use these tools, these traditions, in a context which is 100% backed by church authorities is very important. And then from a more psychological and relational perspective, just to meet as any young adults would, in university or wherever. Well, in Juventutem, you meet with young people who have made the choice to spend, in this case, the Sunday afternoon here in this church, rather than do something else, and for a reason which you share with them, which is to be sanctified through these traditions of the church.
So you can draw a conclusion from these premises that it's very likely that among these young people, there will be some with whom you can really become friends, but hopefully with everybody, but perhaps even more specifically if they live near you, or if they are interested in the same university subjects as you, or whatever. So yeah, that sanctification will very much be implemented through friendliness and healthy good relations between members of the group. So nothing really very spectacular and new, but simply these traditions as implemented and offered and lived together in communion with the church and among young people who have the same aim of making it to heaven.
I would just like to jump in and give a couple more instances of particular testimony to your question. That George Stephen, who is the president of the International Federation, I'm pretty sure he met his wife through either Juventutem or something very much like Juventutem. In Michigan, we've been blessed to see the coincidence that one of our board members, in essence, his first date with the girl he married was a Juventutem event. And then beyond that, we've had at least two couples we know, one of which has been to exactly one Latin Mass. They met at that Juventutem event, and they're now engaged to be married. And so we've got a couple of marriages that we're praying for when they happen. In addition, I was introduced to Juventutem through Andrew Curtis, who is now at Denton as a seminarian for the fraternity. And he had gone to the first edition in Cologne. So there are more, and just ask around and you'll find even more stories than I know.
So the purpose of Juventutem, if I understood correctly, is for the sanctification of the youth, particularly through the traditions of the Roman Rite. And I was wondering, what is it, can you mention a few things in the traditions of the Roman Rite that are particularly suited to our sanctification, the treasures that we could glean from this so that we can live out better the spirituality of Juventutem? Because it seems that if we are devoted to the sanctification of youth through the Roman Rite, there must be something there in particular that's different than what we find in other places.
Yes. There is a great diversity of liturgical tradition in the church, as you know, and many of them have full approval from the church, and Eastern rites and all that, and even here in Chicago. I know that it's not only the Roman Rite. So what I insist on is specifically within the Roman Rite what Benedict designed or defined as the extraordinary form of the Roman Rite. So basically the traditional Mass and liturgy, as we call it, to be simple. There is no claim again that faith in the Blessed Sacrament and in the real presence is something exclusive to the traditional liturgy, obviously. The church wouldn't be the church if it were the case. So in any parish where the priest validly ordained and consecrate with the intention of saying Mass, well, you have our Lord present. But it is true, and it's a bit out of the scope of this talk now to go too much into details, but thinking of the Mass which was at the midday today upstairs, traditional Mass, I think it's obvious to everybody that there is a focus on the altar. The priest is not looking at the people and is really recollected on the divine victim whom he's offering there. And there is such an emphasis on the objective reality of that presence of Christ in the Holy Eucharist. And many gestures or practices which are tolerated in the ordinary form and which are, I think, a hindrance to a deeper faith in a real presence do not occur in the Old Rite, like extraordinary ministers of communion or like communion of the hand. And this simply is not part of it. And I believe one is able to see the coherence and insistence of the Church in that rite on the real presence and the sacrifice in a way which is not at all as eloquent in the new rite. That's essentially
how we want to have the sanctification.
As some of my Michigan friends know, and as others will discover, I claim to have a certain charism of bossiness that I hope is ordered towards everyone having a better time and meeting more people. At this time, I'm going to introduce a 10-minute break in case there are people who need to go. If someone can tell us where the facilities are here. All right. And in terms of the bossiness, when we reconvene in 10 minutes, if you're still here, I'm going to ask that the ladies still be sitting at the tables that you're presently at, and that the gentlemen, except for the two married ones, though they're free to do whatever they want, that the gentlemen be sitting somewhere new. So we'll be back at 40.
So what you want to do? 4:30. You want to go somewhere?
What's it?
You want to go get pictures or whatever? It's 4:30, so we're going to be running out of daylight. It's up to you.
Yeah. My camera's still in the car. The neighborhood isn't as bad anymore.